Over the last year, there's been a flood of new people rushing out to their local Democratic organizations, and they're usually people that have not been very politically involved before. And now that they are, the question comes up a lot, how do I even talk about this to my family and neighbors? I feel very passionate about my liberal-leaning politics, but I live in an area that doesn't agree with that. So how do I have that discussion with others?
And that really extends to the bigger question, isn't it? Is that how can Democrats have a conversation with people who haven't voted Democrat in the past or are inclined to be on the fence or vote Republican? It's really a question of framing the issue. You can say the jobless rate, the unemployment rate is 4.1%, or you can talk about the job you lost last year and your struggles, and think about the difference between the two of those.
And when you approach people, I mean, we're at a point in our political discourse where it seems we have different facts. And if you just start spouting, whether they are true facts or alternative facts, the other side seems to always have something to counter them.
Right. They can just say, I don't believe that statistics. What do the scientists know about climate change? Whatever reason they come up with to avoid certain facts conversations. But that's harder to do when you talk about your personal story.
Yeah, no one can argue with you that you went through something, that you physically saw that or felt that.
Exactly. It's and the other thing is people can relate to it, right? People can't really dismiss you if you're coming up to them and telling them about a direct experience that...
Like losing your job. Sick kid.
Having a healthcare problem.
Kitchen table issues.
That's what always gets people going at the end of the day, no matter how much we talk about broader national conversations.
Today on Blue Wave Pod, we're going to talk with Rachel Sosnowchik, who is with OFA, Organizing for Action. And she's going to teach us a bit about how to craft your own story.
Right, and you may have heard of OFA, formerly known as Obama for America, but now taking on a more non-partisan tack and going out there into different communities across the country and trying to help people become effective communicators and engage their local community. We're here today with Rachel Sosnowchik of Organizing for Action, Field Director for Organizing for Action for Northeast Ohio. Thanks so much for joining us today, Rachel.
It is very exciting to be here.
So we want to talk a bit about OFA. It's gone through a lot of iterations, starting with Obama for America and then going on to Organizing for America and now Organizing for Action. Could you walk us through sort of the history of the group and how it got to where it is today?
Yeah. So, I did not come on to OFA until May of 2017. So I was not there to experience its many different forms over the years, but it did start off as sort of the grassroots leg of the Obama campaigns in 2008 and 2012. And after the success of both of those campaigns, they wanted to take the same skills that they were teaching people, the relationship building and the community organizing, and keep doing that. They didn't want to end after 2012. And so that's when the Organizing for America phase came in. And then as far as I know, from sort of 2012 to 2015, they were sort of in a weird limbo where there was only so much they could do because Obama was still in office. And so there were just a lot more restrictions on sort of what kind of advocacy they could do on a national level, but they still had volunteer chapters all around the country that were taking these same community organizing skills and doing work around local issues and things that matter to them on a very local level. And then after the 2016 election, they decided that they wanted to take more of an issues advocacy role, again, on a national level. And so when I got involved, first as a volunteer in January of 2017, and then eventually in my role as an organizer, it was a lot of pressure events, targeting certain elected officials when there were big votes coming up. Mostly it was really healthcare for the first half of 2017.
That's where we met you, actually.
Yeah, at the Andy Slavitt town hall. That was my third day as an organizer, was that event with Andy Slavitt. And so my predecessor sort of helped set the stage. But yeah, that was like the first, which is such a weird
that feels like years ago, honestly.
It does. But fun fact about it, your third day, that was the day we decided that we were going to launch this podcast.
Oh, that's true.
It took us a while. So
I feel like I should have been like your first guest or something.
We gotta get Andy
with our
Slavitt.
history. Yeah, I wish. He was great though. And so as you guys, saw, obviously, healthcare was a huge issue for a lot of people, and just felt like it kept, there was vote after vote after vote, and it kept getting dragged out. And so it was just a lot of rallies and protests and, getting people out in the streets to just, share their concerns and why this issue mattered to them. And so now that we're in an election year, OFA is a nonpartisan organization. And so we can't, endorse candidates or anything like that. We're working on it, but as of now, a lot of it is more so just, teaching people these skills and doing more traditional, grassroots organizing, building capacity. So recruitment and trainings and workshops and stuff to give people the tools they need to feel comfortable taking action, whether that's supporting a candidate or, continuing sort of this more grassroots, rallying and things like that. So that's where we are now.
And tell us a little about yourself. What made you want to join OFA back in the beginning of 2017?
So I'm originally from Nebraska, and that is not the most progressive state in the United States, which is probably not surprising to anyone. But I knew my mom is very liberal, and I think I definitely got a lot of my views from her, and just throughout college, and I had a lot of friends, and just the classes I was taking made me realize that our world is not the most equal place, and that there are ways through policy, through politics, that we can make it a better place for more people. And so that's more, I guess, the theoretical background for why I'm interested in this. But a lot of it was really spurred by the 2016 election. I had volunteered a little bit for Hillary back in Omaha and was doing work there. And obviously things didn't turn out the way we wanted to. And I just realized that there wasn't any room for just waiting around and sitting at home and complaining and wanting things to be different. That's not, I'm a big advocate of complaining doesn't solve anything. If you have, concerns, then you should go out there and do something. And I had a friend actually who was sort of the first, she did this job that I now have from January to May. And she was doing the organizing and getting people out there and recruiting, and she needed someone to help her. And I said, sure, this is what I want to be doing, and these are issues that I care about. And so I was her go-to volunteer for those, 4 or 5 months, and then she left, and here I am.
Your big thing that you're pushing right now, and I just went to a couple weeks ago, is effective conversations workshops.
Yes.
How many of these workshops have you run so far?
I did the one out here in Medina, and I've done smaller portions of that same training using the same, presentation twice, 2 other times over the last few months. And then I'm in talks with 3 or 4 other groups to do more of those this spring. So I'm trying to do as many as I can in as many different parts of Northeast Ohio as I can, so that everyone has the opportunity to.
What's the reaction to these so far?
Everyone that I have talked to, and at least to my face, they've been very, very excited. And I think sort of the biggest takeaway from these trainings is that we need to be able to talk about these maybe more difficult topics with people that, and not even people who disagree with us, but people like our friends and family who tend to be sort of apolitical and, don't think that they have to get involved in politics, or it's just not for them. And I talk to people all the time who, look at these issues the same way that I do and sort of have the same, want the same outcomes, but they're just really they don't want to go rally, or, they're just kind of uncomfortable with what they see as the prescribed ways to take action. And I think the biggest takeaway from these effective conversations trainings is just that, we need to be able to articulate our own reasons for getting involved in this kind of work. We need to be able to help other people think more critically about why these issues matter to them. Whether it's, they had a personal experience, with healthcare or with immigration or something, or if they just believe that our world should be, a fair place and that it's not right now and they need to do something about it. But
you mentioned sort of the issues that people come and have a difficult time talking about. What are the main issues at the forefront of the conversations you're having?
It depends on where I am. So I try to travel around to as many, like I said, as many different parts of Northeast Ohio. So I spend time out in Ashtabula and Painesville, way on the east side, Akron and Canton, and out here in Medina. And I think it's hard to, I think it does get to the sense of this unfairness or this injustice, and that people are, working hard and they're doing everything they're supposed to be doing, following this prescribed plan to like how to be a successful person or have this sense of security. And yet things are happening sort of beyond their power, or decisions are being made by people in power that are sort of ruining that. And they're, these people feel like they're doing everything they're supposed to, but they're still not getting that success, that they've worked for. And so, a lot of that comes from, things like healthcare. So like, you are a great employee and you're working hard trying to provide for your family, but then an accident happens or you get a diagnosis and you now, thankfully, because of the Affordable Care Act, this isn't an issue as much, but you're faced with these crippling healthcare costs and that totally derails your plan. And so I think it's, the specific issues for people are different, and sort of how their plan that they have for their life is being affected. But it's just this sense of we're working hard and we just want to, we want to provide for our family and the people we care about. And what, I want people in power to do what's going to be best for me and my family.
It's really interesting how regardless of what time period we're in, or even after something crazy like 20, it comes down to those kitchen table issues that people always talk about, right? People sitting there with a bill and not knowing how to pay it and trying to figure out how to make it work. And that's what people really, that's what gets people.
Well, and even so at the training that we did out in Medina, we talked about what are good ways that you can sort of initiate that conversation with people about what issues they care about. And one of the questions that somebody provided was what was it? Oh, what do you stay up at night thinking about? Like, what are your worries that are, preventing you from getting a restful night's sleep? What are your biggest concerns that you can't get out of your head no matter what? And I think, and it's the same thing, these kitchen table issues, these things that, everyone, and I think a lot of people, regardless of party, have the same concerns. And it's just figuring out, how we can talk to each other about those issues in a way that doesn't get so divided.
Let's jump into that a little bit.
Yeah.
The conversations workshop here.
Yeah.
Can you break it down for us on the basic steps to create your conversation?
Yeah. So there's sort of, this is going to sound like so basic because it's like, how do you talk to somebody? But it's being able to share your own personal story and articulate both to another person, but then also it requires some soul searching on your end, I guess, just like why you wanted to get involved in this, why this matters to you, what were the challenges you faced, how did you respond to those challenges, why are you here now? So being able to articulate that really clearly to somebody, so that they can sort of see where you're coming from, but then also to be able to ask them, where they're coming from, and the listening part of it.
This seems evident, right? Like when you talk about it out loud, you're like, well,
yeah,
duh. But
of course you're going to do that.
So many people I talk to feel like they can't approach someone else about politics because they feel they're not an expert, right? Mm-hmm. I haven't studied healthcare, therefore I can't talk to them about healthcare.
Yeah.
But after going through this workshop with you, I really thought that it kind of opened a lot of people's eyes in there that they could start telling their personal story, and that would connect them to that person enough where they can offer them a solution. Well, maybe I think universal healthcare is a thing that we should talk about.
And it's not, because we don't experience an issue like healthcare in the way that it's talked about, I think, usually like in the media with like these large numbers and talking about, insurance premiums are going to raise by, 12.8% or whatever. Like that is so abstract. And so you need these personal stories to help bring it down to like a very relatable level, because that's, I think, what people connect with more than with the facts and figures. So you don't need to necessarily have studied it. I spend a lot of time reading a lot of articles about things like healthcare because I just think they're interesting, but that's not realistic for the average person. Then also, I just don't think it's necessary.
I want to clarify a bit. When I said that they don't feel comfortable talking about it, I think they definitely feel comfortable talking about it around other Dems.
Yeah.
When they get with people that they know are like-minded, it just flows. Mm-hmm. But when they feel that they might get pushed back against, that's when they hold back because they feel like they're...
Because do I know enough to be able to argue the nuances of the healthcare system with, someone who maybe knows more about it than I do? And
yeah,
that was another thing that I think got brought up at the training as well, was that, someone can't tell you this personal experience, this thing that happened to you is wrong. Like, that they can be like, oh, like, you had that experience. Well, no, that didn't actually happen. I guess they could say that. Yeah. But like, it's harder, I think, to push back when you're speaking in stories and in personal experiences versus when you're speaking in the numbers and the facts.
100%. I mean, I think part of when we talk about art, you're right. I think it is easy to talk about people who agree with you, obviously. But one of the problems is when you talk to someone who disagrees with you these days, they work on a different set of facts a lot of times, or, a different complete viewpoint where not necessarily they're speaking from knowledge or anything, but it's just how do you have a conversation with somebody who's just, healthcare is a great example, right? Where people get my hands off my Medicare and all this good stuff, where people are, it's just a complete, they're in their own little world, in their own bubble. And it's so hard to break those bubbles apart. I mean, the left has that problem too, right? I mean, sometimes, and I'm sure what I want to get into a lot is just about how the differences with the more progressive communities and cities versus somewhere out here in Medina. But I want to go back to this effective communication thing. So tell us a bit about how do you start building a story? What do you tell these people to do?
Yeah. So OFA uses this wonderful framework that they have been using since, 2007, when they were sort of doing they were in their first iteration, since we went through the history before. And so it involves, there's sort of 4 parts to sharing your personal story, or things that you should include in your story to make it as effective as possible. And so that usually it starts first with there's some sort of challenge that you faced in your life. And that can be something, for some people it's, more extreme, and some it's not this things that necessarily would look to the outside world, I guess, as something that would have changed your life or been super challenging, but, you still perceived it as a challenge. And then there's the choice and how you responded to that challenge. And typically, if you were out talking to somebody, sharing your choice was I'm going to sit at home and just complain at the TV. Your choice was I'm going to do something about this. So that's the second part, is the choice. And then there's the outcome. And again, if you're out talking in the street, the outcome isn't, and then it was the worst thing. I'm so upset that I got involved and it's been terrible. So I, went back and sat on my couch. So you share, the outcome of that choice that you made. And then the last part, which is both the most important and the hardest part, because I think usually the things that are most important are the hardest to do. And that's the ask. And so how do you, share your story in a way and then try to get this person, whoever you're talking to whether it's to join you in volunteering for, a specific candidate, or, can you come to this event with me, or can you, do you want to be a volunteer, or whatever it is. But it could also just be like, I'm just trying to think in like, if you're just having a conversation with your family or like a friend or something, someone who isn't super political normally, but, do you think that you could start, like, I don't know, like get a New York Times subscription or something, or like, I don't know, just like ways that you can sort of slowly get people engaged. And so the ask is another thing we talked a lot about at the training, but the ask is going to be very different depending on the audience, depending on the capacity in which you're having the conversation. And so sometimes maybe you want to figure out what that ask is first. What are you trying to achieve with this conversation, and then work backwards. But that's basically it. You got the four parts.
I'd love to see an example of this, or hear an example of this.
Yes,
I don't know if you know of anybody.
So we're going to make Eric do it. We're going to walk him through it, and hopefully everyone listening will see. Yeah, we'll see how this is an effective way to share your story. So first, we are going to talk about a challenge. And so, Eric, you can pick whatever challenge you want. And whatever, you were just talking to me as somebody, I said we weren't going to do it. Okay, you're talking to me as literally a person, right? So we're just hanging out.
Can you role play a person?
Yeah, I'll try my best.
I just feel bad that I broke my promise. I didn't
promised no role playing, but here it comes. All right.
No, here we are.
All right, so we'll go with healthcare because it's near and dear to me, and we've been talking about healthcare this entire time. So let's go with healthcare.
Stick with it.
All right, so I am a 2-time cancer survivor. I had leukemia when I was 5 and again when I was 15. So that's my story. So where do I go with that?
All right. So you could look at the challenge just more broadly in terms of having cancer is enough of a challenge in and of itself. But I think sort of the way the healthcare conversation is typically discussed right now is in terms of paying for your care and how you receive treatment for It doesn't always, not always something as extreme as cancer, but how you can afford that coverage or how your parents could afford that coverage. And then also now you being able to afford that coverage as somebody who would have what could be considered a pre-existing condition.
Sure. So I had cancer well before Obamacare came into place. And my family struggled a lot with this because if I had any lapse in coverage, any sort of gap whatsoever, cancer would become a pre-existing condition and then not covered anymore. And I'm a multi-million-dollar patient.
Yeah.
I've had over 7 years of chemotherapy, so that's a lot of money. And it was all covered by our health insurance. But when I was 16 years old and still on chemo, both my parents were laid off within a year's time from each other. And my mom had to take a job. She was a teacher, but she couldn't get another job right away. So she had to pick up a job doing laundry because it offered insurance. And we couldn't have that gap, right? And then when I graduated college, I immediately lost my health care again. And I had to start paying into COBRA. And I was paying $800, $900 a month just to be on the minimum
As a
COBRA.
recent college graduate?
As a recent college graduate.
Oh my God.
That was a waiter because I didn't have a full-time job. It's more than my mortgage of my first house, right? And I had no money for that. Just so I didn't have a gap in coverage. At the same time, this is when Obama is running for president. And eventually, Obamacare came into effect and it helped cover that. I didn't have to worry about that. And I got a full-time job after that, which really helped. Yeah. But so that was my biggest challenge, I guess, what I had to struggle against. And I guess we can connect that to why I think the Affordable Care Act is so important. Because it covers that gap.
I mean,
right?
So you've had these experiences, you had these challenges, and so then, flash forward to, I guess it's been pretty much under constant attack since it was signed into law. But I guess the most recent threats, all throughout 2017, sort of how did your previous experiences and your previous challenges impact the choices that you then made, how you reacted to those threats?
I think that I changed and I became a lot more involved politically because of those things. I got a chance to actually meet President Obama when he was running the first time in 2008. And that's the thing I wanted to talk about with him. I didn't really get a chance to talk that long. I was in a group of, a sizable group. But I noticed in the audience, that was all the questions he got was almost all about healthcare. And that's why I was there too. And that's why I really supported him and worked with his campaign and whatnot. So I think that was my action towards it. Yes, to help push that agenda.
Okay.
Right?
Am I on the right steps? Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. Yeah. I went too far forward then. So you started taking action well before the attacks on the ACA in 2017 because you had these experiences and you knew your own struggles.
In college, I volunteered for the campaign.
Okay. Gotcha. So, all right. So then what was the outcome of that choice to get more involved with his campaign?
Obama won solely because of me, and then America
correlation.
And you don't have cancer anymore.
I don't have cancer anymore. And America was perfect for 8 years, I believe it was. And
yeah, that's exact. I mean, okay, we can take parts of that. But I mean, and also just how did it make you feel to take action? Was it a rewarding experience? Did you feel like it was useless? What was your, maybe on a very more personal level? I
mean, it was very encouraging. That was my first foray into politics, right? And then after that point, I've been involved since then. And I guess the attacks on the ACA have just continued to build that. I would like it to go further than the ACA in the future for healthcare and what they do. But I mean, that's the main thing that's kept me involved, I think. There are a lot of other policies I care a lot about, but that's the main one for me.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, that's beautiful.
So the next step is ask.
The ask is a little tricky, seeing as how we are sitting in a basement recording a podcast. So there's not a lot, I guess.
It's a podcast studio.
It's a studio. It's a very legitimate professional studio. But so if you were, canvassing or something, knocking on someone's door and you had shared a condensed version of the story you just shared with us, the ask could be, would you support this candidate, or would you consider, coming to a phone bank and volunteering with us and sharing your own story? And that's the sort of the one side of it is you just talking to the person. But then there's the other side of the effective conversation, which is trying to get the other person to share their personal story. And obviously they are not going to follow along with this wonderful like 4-part outline that we just went over.
But you could help them, right?
Yes, yeah.
You could ask them questions about what came next. What did you do?
Yes, well, yeah, and it's not even so much about the what questions, but it's the why questions. And really, I mean, it's one of those other things that sounds really simple in theory, but when you're trying to do it in practice, it can be a little bit harder. But asking them, you know, about the issues that keep them up at night, and then, you know, why does that issue matter to you? Or, you know, what was your experience and how did you react to that experience? And, you know, why, just getting at the why. And yeah, again, like you said, trying to get them through that same sort of outline.
So this is what OFA is pushing, is a lot of storytelling. Why did they and you believe that storytelling is the key for progressive candidates and policies for the future?
I mean, again, I already said this a little bit, but it's people aren't experiencing these policy, like the numbers that are thrown around in the news, like those aren't things that you can connect with very easily, and they don't make a lot of sense to most people. But you know what your experience was, you know, having cancer and struggling to afford, you know, health insurance as a recent college graduate. Like that is something that you're very familiar with and comfortable with. And I think that that's what, you know, we need to shift more towards stories, because that's what people are going to connect with, whether it's, you know, friends and family and people that you already know but don't talk about these issues a lot with, or if you're trying to convince a total stranger that, you know, this is something is worth their time. So whether, again, volunteering for a candidate or going to this rally and, you know, sharing their story, or showing up to this forum or phone banking or any of it, that's how we're going to convince people to take action, is by, you know, helping them to understand what their experiences have been with these issues. Because it's also stuff that I think people aren't always so great at articulating. They can kind of understand, they know that this happened to them, but they struggle to connect what happened to them with like what's happening, the larger national conversation and, you know, the policy side of it. So we're just helping people make that connection.
It's one of the biggest things is exposure, right? I mean, they've done studies where if someone goes door to door and somebody who has had an abortion talks about their experience, or, you know, who's gay or trans talks about their experience to somebody face to face, it can change minds, it can change perspectives way more so than, you know, an internet comment or something.
And
like
and it might not happen in one conversation.
Right.
You know, you might need to talk with people a couple of times, but it's something that you can start. I mean, everyone needs to be better at this, I think, and needs to start those conversations and start that, you know, dynamic.
Empathy is hopefully not all dead, generally.
No, and so much of this revolves around empathy and being able to understand how someone, you know, looks at the world the way they do, and how that came to be.
Well, I think this was a very effective conversation.
Sorry, I couldn't help myself.
We can't keep saying it.
I quit.
Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh my god!
What is wrong with you?
It's just so easy
Can't help
to
myself
do.
sometimes. The dad jokes are.
It's easy.
Ever since you got the third one, it's just gotten worse.